dude, here's the thing, because I'm looking at PFF. I use it as reference.
Yeah, I got
you got to use it as reference.
No, you do. You definitely do. You definitely do.
Because there's certain things about it I'm not really going to buy into, but it's like one of those things where, all right, what are they seeing to have someone ranked so high? Dude, they had Steven Nelson ranked 7 in their cornerbacks from last year.
Yeah.
They had Joe Haden actually worse than Mike Hilton. They still had Joe Haden in the top 25. I think they had him at 25 though. What am I missing here, dude? Because Joe Haden, I'm presuming, is covering their top receiver, and he had the 5 picks last year. He's got the name recognition. He's got the Pro Bowls throughout his career. So, and he's been pretty much locked out. I can't really think.
Yeah.
I know with Steven Nelson last year, John Brown went off against him. I can't think of anyone that went off against Joe Haden. So what am I missing there? I mean, I'm going to stick with Haden, but I'm actually just curious about your perspective of Nelson over Haden, because you hear people on Instagram, you post something out there that will say, you know, I feel like Steven Nelson's better than Joe Haden. I've never really understood that, so I want to hear this out.
Yeah. So with Joe Haden and Steven Nelson, unlike some of these other top tier corners, this is why I feel like they kind of hurt their rankings a little bit. Similar to what was going on in Baltimore, Marlon Humphreys and Marcus Peters. They play more right-left versus like a Tre'Davious White or a Gilmore or a Jalen Ramsey who are following their one. So it's times where Joe's going to see the one, and it's times where Steven Nelson's going to see the one. The difference is Joe Haden was getting the interceptions, so statistically look better. But when we watch the film, how many of those interceptions were last play of the game heaves or fourth quarter heaves when the game? No, seriously.
Cardinals, there was one.
Cardinals.
I can't even.
The Browns was another one.
He had one with the Ravens. It was at the end of the game, right?
So it was multiple interceptions that he had.
He did drop a few though.
True, but the thing is this though. From the stats, we talk about when you just, that's why last time you say the stats don't say the full story, because you look on the paper and say, oh, he had this many interceptions, he had to be balling out. But a lot of those interceptions, when you look at the context of them, it's the equivalent of a guy getting a sack when he was the unblocked rusher. So, for example, like a Marcus Golden, right, who had the 10 sacks in New York, and everybody was like, well, why didn't he get paid? Then you look at the tape and it's like, well, a lot of this was just off of the scheme. It wasn't necessarily him just flat out dominating somebody, where you look at a guy like TJ Watt, it didn't matter about the scheme. He was just winning. So with Joe's numbers from the interception standpoint, that's why. But when you look at the amount of yards allowed, you look at the completion percentage, you look at touchdowns allowed, Steven Nelson's numbers are up there with Gilmore, up there with Tre'Davious White.
Yep.
But the reason why I don't have Steven Nelson higher is because he's not doing it 100% of the time versus the number one receiver, whereas Gilmore and Tre'Davious, they are 100% of the time locked on that one.
We just don't need that here.
Well, that's why I said it's no different in Baltimore with Marlon Humphreys and Marcus Peters. Like, can those guys shadow? Yeah, we've seen Marcus Peters shadow a guy and get intercepted. We've seen that, but they don't need to when you got another guy that's just as good on the other side. And that's why I say I feel like Steven and Joe, because I had Joe as my next man in, but I'm like, they kind of cancel each other out because the argument is going to be made the exact same way. And for Joe, my argument would be, well, he did get the interceptions, whereas Steven didn't. But then for Steven, I'm like, well, overall, from just a coverage standpoint, yards allowed standpoint, he was the better corner on that statistic. So it's more so what you want. I mean, obviously you could put more weight on Joe Haden getting the interceptions because those are actual turnovers. But my thing is, when you look at the context of when those turnovers happen, did they really have a weighing on the outcome of the game? Because we knew that Browns pick, I mean, granted, it was still a one-score game.
It out?
It closed it out. Yeah, it was a one-score game.
I guess same with Cardinals. I think that was one-score game too.
Both of them one-score games, but never did we feel, oh, it's in question, or oh, they're about to come back. It wasn't as if they were moving the ball either on either one of those drives. I mean, you look at the Kyler Murray interception, I think TJ Watt is about to smack him, and he just throws it up in the air.
The first one in that game was smooth, though.
Yes, very well, and that's the thing. Not all of them. That's why I said some of them. But when you look at the context,
he had some drops throughout the season where I think that stuff kind of evens out, though.
See, I don't, because when you drop it, you drop it.
I know
that's a missed opportunity.
It's unfortunate, man.
I don't give you a pat on the back for dropping the pick and say, well, you got that one, so it kind of washes. Like, nah, that's not how it works.
The 5 picks make sense though, no matter what. Yeah. Like it could have been more, but I think 5 just for the amount of drops that he had, and you want to talk about it's late game, whatever. 5 seemed like the right number for him last year. Maybe 6. Maybe it should have been 6.
Okay. Yeah. But that was my biggest difference between those two. So I went with the guy that, like I said, even though he didn't have the same interception numbers, from a coverage standpoint, he was the more productive player in that department. So, and my thing is this, man, when your numbers are rivaling Stephon Gilmore and Tre'Davious White,
I know,
it's hard for me not to put you up there because we know what they did this season from a matching up on number one receiver standpoint and knowing that, hey, they're getting action. That's the guy that's getting looked at every time. It's easy when you're on the number 2 or sometimes you're on the number 3. That's a little bit easier. But when you're on that one receiver every time, you know that's option number 1. And if you're not on your P's and Q's, you will be exposed.
It's interesting. Do you think Nelson has like a next level to go, and maybe Haden has already hit his prime, and we're not going to see much more of a peak from Haden? Mm-hmm. Are you thinking that?
Well, this is the thing. I think Haden is who he is. I think he's always going to be in that Pro Bowl conversation. I think for the next 2 to 3 years, I still can see him playing at the level he's playing at.
Definitely.
I just don't know if Steven Nelson necessarily has the pedigree to get to Joe Haden's status. You know what I mean? Because like Joe is a known name. Joe.
Are you just talking about recognition?
Yeah, just recognition in general, just playmaking ability. Like certain things that Joe does is like, yeah, but Joe was a top 5 pick also. So you have to remember, like, in context, it's a little bit different from an athletic standpoint and things like that. Whereas Steven's still on the upswing. He's still trying to get to that level. He had the season in Kansas City where he had the 4 picks, but remember, he was the most targeted player out there. It was different. This year was probably his most complete year, but he doesn't have the gaudy statistics to go with it. So it's like, all right, I think he can still continue to get better, especially playing opposite Joe Haden. But I just don't know if he'll ever reach Joe Haden level in terms of just overall playmaking ability, overall, hey, that's the guy that you want on your number 1 receiver every single time, shadow him. I don't know if he will get to that level per se.
Gotcha.